Good evening, everyone. My name is Lisa Hollingsworth and I am the Mayor of the City of Boroondara and the Chair of the Council meeting. Due to the fact that we have a meeting underway that we've adjourned, I call upon Council to put forward a motion that this meeting be delayed until the prior meeting is adjourned. And so if we can have an adjournment for this meeting, could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Galt and Councillor Addis, thank you. Can I see those in favour of adjourning the meeting? That is unanimous, thank you. We'll now close this meeting and we will now adjourn this meeting, thank you. Councillors, I'm in seek of a motion to resume the council meeting. Councillor Sinfield.
Happy to move that.
And seconded. Councillor Gillies, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, can I see those in support of opening the motion, opening the meeting? Thank you. Unanimous support, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the council meeting of the 20th of May 2024. I will commence the meeting by calling on Councillor Addis to read the acknowledgement of country.
Thank you. I acknowledge the Wurundjeri Woi Wurrung people as the traditional owners and original custodians of this land, and I pay my respects to elders past and present and any elders from other communities who may be here today.
Thank you, Councillor Addis. Welcome to tonight's council meeting. Before we commence, I ask that all mobile phones are turned off or switched to silent. The council meeting is being live streamed on the council website, so you can watch proceedings of the meeting, council deliberations and voting. The meeting will also be recorded and made available on council's website as soon as practicable after the meeting. My name is Councillor Lisa Hollingsworth. I am the Mayor of the City of Boroondara and I chair this meeting. I will now introduce my fellow councillor colleagues. Seated to the left of the horseshoe table is Councillor Jim Park, Councillor Felicity Sinfield, our Deputy Mayor, Councillor Wes Galt, Councillor Di Gillies, and on the opposite side, Councillor Cynthia Watson, Councillor Gary Thompson, Councillor Jane Addis, Councillor Susan Biggar, and Councillor Victor Franco. There is also in attendance this evening Councillor Nick Stavrou, who's attending the meeting, who you can see on the screen behind me. Councillor Stavrou is attending via electronic means. I also acknowledge in attendance this evening our Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Philip Storer, sitting beside me on my right, and our Acting Chief Financial Officer, Sapphire Allen, and our Coordinator of Governance, Ms. Kirsten Ritchie, on my left. Apologies, Ms. Ritchie, are there any for this evening?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor, there are no apologies for tonight's meeting.
Thank you. Declaration of conflict of interest of any councillor or councillor officer. Councillors or officers, is there anyone that wishes to declare an interest? No? No lights on. So the agenda item this evening is the draft budget for 2024-25. I present to you tonight's council draft budget for the 2024-25 financial year. This budget delivers on our commitment to sustainable budgeting and responsible financial management. We remain in a strong financial position and continue delivering our community's priorities. The funding allocated through multiple years of projects is in place so that we can support our community's health and wellbeing with renewed community buildings and vital services for everyone. How we spend money on public spaces and community assets is guided by community's feedback as documented in the Boroondara Community Plan. We will be reviewing and renewing the community plan this financial year, inviting the community to take part in 2 stages of consultation to ensure we continue to understand what's most important to everyone. The draft budget outlines services, initiatives and major projects being funded in alignment with the community plan throughout 2024 and 25. Some of the major projects include renewal of one of our most loved sporting and community facilities, the Michael Tuck Stand at Glenferrie Oval. We have committed $29.47 million over the next 4 years to deliver this project. Lifelong learning will be supported as we progress the Kew Library redevelopment, with $21.8 million allocated over the next 3 years. We will finalise and implement the new tree canopy strategy with an allocation of $2.88 million. This will support our current aim to plant 1,500 trees per year, increasing to 2,000 trees per year by 2025-26. Funding will also go towards finalising our urban biodiversity strategy. Our climate action plan implementation will receive another $1 million to roll out key initiatives including a litter and pollution reduction strategy to protect our waterways and installing more electric vehicle charging stations. In support of the local economy, funds have been allocated to upgrade local laneways and streetscapes to attract more visitors to activity centres. This includes $440,000 to progress the upgrade of the Columbia Street laneway and the Glenferrie Road streetscape designs. $3 million will be invested to continue improving our sports grounds, including ground reconstruction at Watson's Park in Ashburton and Victoria Park South Oval in Kew. A number of sports ground pavilions will be renewed, with $10.52 million allocated to support the growing demand of female participation in sport and make them more accessible for everyone. Our commitment to heritage is made clear, with funding allocated for additional planners to develop a new heritage strategy. Funding for Council's key services include $37 million to help maintain our infrastructure and assets to the standard expected by our community. $75 million to continue providing vital community services such as libraries, health and wellbeing services, and parks and gardens maintenance. Community submissions made last financial year have also been considered in drafting this year's budget. In closing, the draft budget 2024-25 will be available for the community to view on Council's website for 2 weeks, commencing from this Wednesday, the 22nd of May, to Wednesday, the 5th of June 2024. During this time, community members can submit items for future budget consideration by Council. I am confident this draft budget demonstrates how we are bringing our community's vision to life, working to create a sustainable and inclusive community. Thank you. This item will now be introduced by Sapphire Allen, our Acting Chief Financial Officer. Good evening, Sapphire.
Good evening, councillors, and through you, Mayor. Presented to you this evening for endorsement is the draft budget for the year 2024-25, which is the first steps towards Council's adoption of the 2024-25 final budget. Preparation for this budget is consistent with the established processes and practices from previous years. Council is in a strong financial position and all VAGO indicators remain positive. The draft budget is informed by the Burundara Community Plan 2021 to 2031. Thank you and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ms Allen. Councillor Sinfield.
I don't have a question, but I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation when the time is right.
Thank you. Councillor Biggar.
Yes, I do have a question, actually. I guess I have expressed some frustrations about the amount of time in the past that we give the community to look at the, or to give comment. And in this case, I just wonder whether or not, given that we're we're basically saying that we're allowing the community to view the draft budget for 2 weeks and then to give comment that will be taken on board for next year's budget. I wonder why we feel we need to limit it. It's quite a short time, really, for a substantial, 200-page document. And I can understand in the past when we might be pressed for time, but in this case, we're actually accepting comments for next year's budget. And I just wonder if if there's any reason, officers, why we couldn't extend that at least.
Thank you for your question.
The timeframe is mostly about just preparing the final document for adoption in June. The other point I guess to make is that if we receive submissions post the 2-week period, we would still consider those. There's no difficulty in actually receiving later submissions and being prepared to treat them in exactly the same way as those lodged within the period of time. If you wished to allow more time, then I'd suggest you put that as a proposition for your colleagues, and we will be prepared to make that work. The core point you're making, I think, is sound in the sense that if we're not having to consider those submissions for this current budget, then they're not going to have a major impact on how we need to go about weighing them up and assessing them. So I understand that and can see that you could, in this case, extend that time for that reason.
May I just follow on then to your first point, which I think your first point was that the reason for doing it was the something about the timing of this budget. But can I just clarify, there really is no, the comments that would be made by the community now would have no impact on the budget that we bring to council in June. Is that correct?
Not unless something was raised with us which was of a serious nature and really warranted more of an urgent response. If that were to be the case, if there was something we were not aware of and it were to be raised with us, we would then need to assess that, consider it and bring forward a proposition to you for consideration. That is probably the most likely scenario which could lead to some potential delay, that's all.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Biggar. Councillor Stavrou.
I don't have a hand up.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Galt is sitting in your seat. Councillor Galt.
Matching shirts, it's hard to tell us apart, I assume.
True.
I can't name a page, my apologies, but I note in the document 24-25 had a projected surplus of 13 million. And I know adjusted for different things, it comes out differently. But then you look further on and FY 26, 27 and 28 are all predicting fairly comfortable surpluses. What are we proposing to use this money for? It must be building up quite rapidly.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. So I think the page you're referring to, there's one under the executive summary where we say the surplus result is 13 million. We also have a forecast result of 22.4 million. So we use it for obviously capital works and priority projects that we work through with councillors, and anything that we have additional left over is invested for council as well.
The projections went right forward to the year 27-28 also, when I think the projection was 20 million at that stage. So a similar approach would apply. We'll look at it during the year and decide what else we spend it on.
Correct, that's right. So we do the projections out for the budget plus 3 years, so we have a 4-year projection. Of course, we do increase, each year considering what our rate cap would be and what we would increase everything to be along that way. It also does depend on what projects we have as well to how much we have left. But at the moment, so the projection for the surplus result in 27-28 will be 19.9 million. So depending what we decide to spend that on.
A good result. Thank you very much.
Councillor Addis.
Thanks, Chair. My question's really a follow-up to what Mr. Storer said, in that it relates to it's not beyond the bounds of possibility that somebody would say something to us that we actually thought, oh, okay, well, maybe we do need to make a change. I'm assuming, like, we're not saying under no circumstances will we ever change a word of this budget.
No, that's correct. If someone came to us, for example, and reported a collapsed drain, just to pick a very straightforward and simple example, one that either we were not aware of or which had more recently collapsed, clearly that would need to be fixed, and we'd be saying to you whatever the cost of doing that was going to be should be incorporated in the budget. So we're not going to be silly about this. If there are things which really need to be done, we would want to tell you about those and make sure we are doing them.
So could we seek, I mean, I take the point that when the time's right, could we seek some guidance about how to handle the fact that we would accept submissions, because obviously we've got until next year to take them on, but that we do still need a closing date? Can we get some advice at some point about whether we need to change the wording of, and how we would do that?
Happy to have a look at that at the time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Through you to the officers, just a couple of questions. With regards to Appendix 1 of the officers' report, was that made public on our website?
So are you talking about the fees and charges appendix?
No,
Oh, sorry, Appendix 1, you mean the attachment 1?
The attachment
to the draft
1.
budget?
Correct.
That was made available this evening out in the airport lounge for council. It will be provided on council's website and be made available to the public on Wednesday,
So,
which is our normal practice.
no,
So.
thank you for that. And I take it for the clarity of Councillor Gott's questions, the gallery and the community may not have known where he was sourcing his question from. That's correct? That's correct.
That is correct, yeah.
So it's only public in terms of the gallery at the moment, but it'll be made public online shortly. Okay, good, thank you. That answers probably my second question, is there is no draft budget made available for our community until council resolves that there is a draft budget to make available. Spot on, fantastic.
That is correct.
Thank you for that. My third question is in sort of further to Councillor Addis's question. My understanding is a draft budget can only change to a certain percentage and no more before it is adopted. And what is that percentage?
I'm happy to come back to you on the exact figure, but it would be within materiality. So we only make small administrative changes. It wouldn't be anything of significance unless we run that past councillors.
And that materiality is determined by whom? By state? Is there legislation that determines that?
I think what we will need to do is come back and give you specific detail on that. My recollection is that there was a change to the materiality approach after the last act, Local Government Act. So rather than give you something which might not be entirely accurate now, I would prefer that we come back to you and send you a note just confirming how that works.
Thanks for that. And I guess that leads on to the reason why we consult on next year's budget rather than this year's budget. But that answers my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. I see no other lights on, so councillors, I am in search. Oh, sorry, Councillor Stavrou.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a question for our CEO. With COVID in the rearview mirror, I wonder whether you, Ms. Storick, could comment on whether that's indeed the case, and we see that in the budget, and going forward, whether the inflationary pressures that the economy is experiencing, whether they have been felt within our financial plan.
think the short answer to that question is those pressures are still there. If you look at the construction sector, it hasn't really returned to the pre-COVID levels, and the annual increase still exceeds what was going on in the industry prior to COVID. So that's reflected in those circumstances. If you look at the recycling contract as an example, which is mentioned in the report, the increase in the charges there is around about 9%, a fair proportion of which attaches to the contract itself. Clearly that contract has not been set on the basis of what CPI was at the time, so it's in excess of CPI and would therefore reflect, I think, an environment in which those cost escalations are still taking place, perhaps not to the same degree, but they're certainly still there.
Thank you, Ms. Thora.
Thank you, Mr Stavrou. Now, I'm aware that Councillor Sinfield foreshadowed the motion earlier. Councillor Sinfield, your light's on.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. And I'm in search of a seconder. Councillor Thompson.
Happy to second, thank you.
Thank you. Now, to assist the mover, is there anyone opposed to the motion? Councillor Franco? To the mover?
In fact, I'd like to move an amendment to the motion.
Councillor Franco, what is your amendment?
The amendment is in clause 2, so of the officer's recommendation. So to read that the draft budget 2024-25 be available for the community to view on Council's website between Wednesday 22 May and Wednesday 5 June 2024 on the basis that any comments received will be considered by Council when adopting the budget for the 2024-25 financial year. That's the change, and the purpose of that is to make clear that we will accept submissions and that they will be considered. That doesn't mean we will materially change or guarantee that we will change the budget or not, but as the CEO has pointed out, there could be scenarios where officers would immediately recommend a change, but there may be scenarios where the elected councillors may also wish to undertake a change.
Councillor Franco, thank you. Before you continue discussing your proposed motion, I'm in search of a seconder. Councillor Biggar?
Yes.
You second that motion. Councillor Franco, then would you wish to continue speaking to the motion?
Thank you. I'm concerned about the approach we've taken in relation to consultation in relation to the budget that we produce. Last year, we took the step, which I didn't support, of not consulting on the budget with a view to having submissions considered for that budget. And this was done nominally because the Local Government Act doesn't require us to undertake such consultation. But the fact that the Local Government Act may not require us to do something, which is a conventional and long-standing practice in local government, doesn't mean we have to follow slavishly the minimum requirements of the Local Government Act. We can, and in my view, should go beyond the minimum requirements of the Local Government Act. We're aware that there can, of course, be circumstances that are significant, an emergency situation. Our Chief Executive Officer has pointed out an example where, again, it's hypothetical, but a circumstance could arise where a submission would be made or material changes would be recommended by council officers to the draft budget. But aside from that, there may be suggestions that are put to the elected council or thoughts and ideas that we can and should consider. We may not adopt those suggestions. We previously undertook such consultation. Didn't mean we always agreed or accepted or followed through. But the idea that we would simply dismiss those concerns and push them off to another financial year is just, for me, it's beyond me, and I don't think it dignifies our council to go down that path. We've got a very short time frame. We've only put up 22 May to 5 June, which is very, very short. Ideally, my view, it should be 4 weeks, but I understand, and if it were feasible, I would be here recommending a 4-week period, but I appreciate that we've got a budget that we have to adopt before the end of the financial year, and the date is 24 June. So we've got a very tight time frame. If the purpose of that is to actually consider the submissions and listen to what people may put to us. So that short time frame only makes sense if we're actually going to listen to submissions and actually take them into consideration for this financial year. Of course, we can make comments that, oh, it's very difficult, we might not, receive any submissions that are worthwhile. We may not receive any submissions. We may not receive any submissions that are worthwhile. We may receive one that has something that sparks our interest and causes us to have a rethink. But let's leave that door open, and rather than by way of council resolution ruling it out and then saying, oh, well, if we think there's something there, we'll of course ignore the resolution. I don't think that's the way to go about it. I think we should clearly make it open and available for comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Franco.
Just a point of order, Madam Mayor. And we may need to suspend standing orders on this, but to consider item 2 as it's been put forward to us, it comes back to that materiality of what we can and can't do on the, and I beg to ask the question again of the CEO as to whether we can actually put some framework around that for us to consider what's on the screen.
Perhaps I could address that by saying that I can't recall a circumstance in all prior years where the issue of materiality has arisen as a result of submissions which have been received. So it's highly unlikely, I would suggest, that you're going to run into problems with regard to materiality. We often have to point out that when we do receive submissions and you are considering them, we do have to have regard to that question. But I do believe the changes made in the Local Government Act actually take some pressure off the application of the materiality principle when you are considering your budget proposals. So I'm not quite sure that I would suggest you need to be too concerned about that in relation to this particular matter that's being raised now.
Thank you. Councillor Biggar, as the seconder, do you wish to speak now or reserve your right?
No, I'll reserve my right, thank you.
Thank you. Now I notice, Councillor Stavrou, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I did have a question, and it relates to the amendment of that point as well. May I ask it, Madam Mayor?
Sorry?
It's a question, so I don't have a comment to make, but a question regarding the amendment, because as it is amended, and I may have not understood Councillor Franco's intent, I thought when we were asking for the public consultation to be considered for the following year, and by doing that, we're removing it because it refers to 24-25 rather than 25-26. And I guess it may relate to Councillor Thompson's question too, because if there is an issue that's brought to us by the community and it's something that's needed to be done, obviously within the realms of possibility, that's so urgent, does it have to be in the budget submission, or we can actually receive it anyway, and as council we would respond to the community anyway, rather than a strategic budget request, probably in the light of what Councillor Biggar was thinking. And with this amendment, are we just basically just undoing all that? Just a question.
Okay. Thank you.
Just a point of order, are we not in debate?
Thank you, Councillor Park. I was just clarifying that. It's a little bit challenging with Councillor Stavrou attending remotely at the moment.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I think there are a number of us around the table that have questions about the implications of the a proposed amendment that Councillor Stavrou, not Councillor Stavrou, Councillor Franco has made. So if I could propose that we have a suspension of standing orders so that questions could be asked.
Thank
I
you.
think many of us would feel a lot more comfortable about what's in front of us.
I tend to agree, thank you. Councillor Watson, are you moving we go into suspension?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Thompson. Thank you. All right, we're going to... I will
Well,
now
you might want to put that to the vote.
sorry, that's what I was trying to say. I will now put that to the vote. Those in favour? I declare that carried. Thank you. So, Councillor Stavrou, would you like to continue with your question, or have you finished asking?
I'm happy to repeat it if everybody wants to hear it again.
I think our CEO will respond to that, but I just wanted to confirm you had finished asking the question.
I had, thank you.
Mr. Storer, thank you.
If council were to receive something which warranted a very, very quick and urgent response, we would do what we do right now and get the job done. And explain to you that we needed to act on that basis. If the matter referred to us was one which hadn't been foreseen, but which we agreed was essential to resource, there are two means by which that can happen. One is by incorporating it in this proposed draft budget. The other one is, or in the adopted budget. The other one is the amended budget, September amended budget, which again provides council with an opportunity to consider matters which have come up in the interim and perhaps were not on its radar at the time, with a view to then allocating required resources. So there are two means by which that could be done, depending upon the scale of what's being sought and the urgency attached to it.
Does that address your question?
The second part then, by the amendment that's put in front of us, perhaps again, Mr. Storer, does that change the intent of where we had all agreed that the community feedback would feed into next year's budget? By making this amendment, it looks to me we're undoing that.
Yes, that's correct. The result of this will be what you have seen on much earlier occasions, where we receive submissions from the community. We need to work our way through each of those submissions, understand the implications of them, provide a report which shows an analysis of those submissions and provides a recommendation. Council often, in considering those submissions, comes to the view that they are generally matters which might be forming part of a future budget consideration, but are not of such significance as to warrant incorporation of the draft they are considering. The concern Council has always expressed in relation to that is a response to the community concern, whereby the community says you're not taking our submissions seriously, you're not attaching weight to them because you're not putting them in the current budget. So it's an awkward situation for all parties. Council, who finds it difficult to include these things at the last moment, and for the community member who makes a submission feeling they're not being heard and unable to gain support for whatever it is they might be submitting. So this is, in essence, if you like, a return, potentially at least, I should say, a return to those concerns which both councillors and the community have expressed in the past.
Thank you, Mr. Storer. On the basis of that, I would just, for the avoidance of doubt, being electronically on, not in the chamber, I'm opposed to the change.
Thank you, Councillor Franco. As Councillor Watson alluded, we have a number of lights on, so I'll go in the sequence of as lights came on. Councillor Park, then Councillor Sinville.
In the hope that maybe we'll get out of here before midnight, my suggestion is that the amendment ought to read, when adopting the budget for the 24-25 financial year or the 25-26 financial year as appropriate. That way, it's a compromise position that actually works.
Thank you, Councillor Park. Councillor Franco, will you consider what Councillor Park just suggested?
Do you want to expand a bit further, Councillor Park? I mean, I have reservations about accepting it, but I'm prepared to hear it a little bit more before I make my comment.
Well, there's not much more to say. It just acknowledges that we'll decide whether the feedback ought to be dealt with for this budget or for next year's budget. So it's from your perspective, it's an improvement over the officer's recommendation, but from those who would oppose what you want, it also means that we signal that we may well not deal with some of it until the following budget as appropriate. And the motivation here was always about not pretending to be considering feedback when there was actually no viable means to do it. That was, you know, those of us who wanted what the officers have recommended were motivated by a desire not to be pretending to the community, but rather to be, you know, the buzzword, authentic, and acknowledging that there was no real ability within that couple of weeks to make significant changes to the budget.
Look, I'm not prepared to accept the change for a number of reasons.
Then I move that amendment.
I'm happy to second it.
Sorry. All right, so we can only deal with one amendment at the time, so we'll need to go through the current amendment before then an alternate amendment is submitted. Councillors, do you want to continue in suspension of the meeting so that you can continue to ask questions to consider?
Just go through the lights in order
Yes,
and ask
and consider.
and ask people who put their lights on if they want to ask questions.
Yes, so at the moment, we'll keep talking with the motion that's put forward, and Councillor Sinfield, you're next if you'd like to speak now.
No, given that a further amendment has been suggested,
Foreshadowed.
I'll leave my comments for now.
Thank you. Councillor Addis.
It's not a question, but I would like to make a comment, and I suspect I can because we've suspended standing orders, so the rules are gone. I think this is disingenuous. Like Councillor Park said, it's just a nonsense to imply we can make substantial changes. It takes, I don't know how many hundreds of hours to balance a budget, and to suggest that we can magically in what would be less than 2 weeks by the time we heard this information, could rejig the whole thing in a way that didn't produce a totally unforeseen consequences, because it's an incredibly complex balancing act. I can't support it. It's dishonest, and I'd rather be honest and people be unhappy than seek to be dishonest to apparently please people.
Thank you,
Are
Councillor.
we in debate?
Sorry,
I mean, we've
Councillor
just-
Franco, no, we're in suspension of standing orders, but I do need to allow everyone the right of reply. So the next to speak is Councillor Watson.
Well, it's not the right reply. It's
Comment.
asking questions or making
Comment,
comments. We're
yes.
not in debate. So the question that I have is not quite a Dorothy Dix, but I do want to have the answer from Phil. So, what are the implications for staff of this change that's proposed? Is it at all realistic that you can take all the comments and suggestions made by the community, process them, put it in the budget, then it comes back to councillors to have a look at the amendments before we then adopt a budget. Is that at all a practical thing to do?
There is an extensive amount of work depending upon the number of submissions you receive, because what happens is when we get those submissions, they are circulated to all members of ELT and to their managers, so that wherever a response is required, it can be brought forward. Often matters will involve more than one directorate or department, so you've got multiple areas of council engaged in providing a response to a particular submission which has been made. So there is quite an amount of work for the staff to do. Again, I need to qualify that by acknowledging it does depend to a degree on the number of submissions which are made and indeed how complex they may well be.
Thank you. In number 2, we don't actually talk or alert the community to the fact that we have a budget amendment process that happens, that we look at it at a midway point. And I'm thinking that perhaps what Councillor Franco is trying to get to is to say to the community, we don't just put it in a drawer marked for next year. Is there a way to signal or put in there that maybe we can consider some things when we come to budget amendment time? Or is that just opening up a can of worms?
The latter. I'd really discourage that as a practice. Typically, the amended budget is very much reflective of an adjustment which has been made from the prior year end of year outcome. And again, it might be that something particularly urgent has arisen. It might well be that a government grant has come through that wasn't anticipated, which might then make you interested in pursuing a project you were not otherwise going to do, for example. It's more about changed circumstances than it is about saying, well, the community's now raised something that they might like us to do, about which there is discretion. So I'd certainly not encourage a practice of looking at the amended budget as if it could open up the discussion again.
Okay, so on that basis, I understand the grace that Council Park is foreshadowing to say, well, what about, we amend the amended motion before us, but I think the most honest thing to say to our community is the motion that the officers actually recommended. Yeah, thank you for answering my question.
Thank you. Susan Biggar, Councillor Biggar.
Yep, thank you. So I was happy to second this for the purpose of debate, but it wasn't really what I was trying to achieve with this change. I mean, my concern was, as expressed, I think, was about the length of time we were giving people even to read and comment in this instant, even if in reality we were actually saying, in theory we could take it for the rest of the year. We weren't saying that, and that was what was concerning to me, because I actually was one who didn't think that the old process was good for anybody, which is effectively what this is just taking us back to, just that, isolated with just that, and that's really not what I'm hoping to achieve, because I found, like many around this table, and I think like many residents, I found it just soul-destroying that people would put a lot of effort into big submissions, and then we just really could not accommodate them in the time, and so it was that document that said no change, no change, no change. And I think none of us want to go, I don't think we want to go back to that. I'm afraid that this will take us back to that. So given that, I think that what we're, I think personally that what Councillor Park has suggested is the way my mind was going too, which is basically just to say that because of the time frame, we are generally, we're looking at your comments for the next budget. However, as appropriate, were there to be something that, as the CEO has suggested, that were to come up in this period of time, I mean, I feel like I'm happy with that, his suggested amendment, but basically we'll get to that in a moment. At this stage, I'm not supportive of what's on the screen.
Okay. Thank you. And Councillor Gulch, you're next.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I absolutely understand what Councillor Stavro is trying to
Franco.
With Victor Franco, Councillor Franco is trying to achieve, and I am very sympathetic towards it. I came onto this council with that as a major driver as well. And am I missing something here? We had one-on-one meetings, two-and-two meetings, group meetings, CB&Ds, discussions with the officers. We talked this to death. And reluctantly, a number of us backed off pushing that line because we understand there simply wasn't time there to do it, and we couldn't give it justice. I was at the receiving end of that. I commented at a budget before I joined council and couldn't believe it when no action recommended. It's insulting to our community. So I understand, Victor, what you're trying to achieve. I support it, but it just, unless something has changed in the Local Government Act or something else to make this work, we're going back over old ground, I would think.
Thank you. Councillor Gillies.
Oh, thanks. I won't repeat a lot of what's already been said here, but in fact, I don't think it dignifies our council to revert to the path that we had changed for what I think were good reasons, and that to consider community consultations in a proper, considered, informed, timely manner for the following year's budget, notwithstanding what our CEO has said in regard to genuine needs arising of an urgent nature. So they're not precluded. I think it would be going backwards. I understand where the intent was coming from, but I supported the discussion to be put into future budget discussions for good reasons I believed then, and I continue to believe now. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I think all lights are on.
I'd like to speak.
Sorry, in suspension of standing orders or back in the council meeting?
I'd just like to speak. Everyone else has had an opportunity.
All right.
It'd be nice to have the opportunity.
No, sorry, Victor, I thought you wanted to speak to your motion. Sorry.
So I'd just like to make some comments and observations in relation to the suggestion that Councillor Parks made and some of the other comments that I've just heard here. So Councillor Parks suggested that I add the words as appropriate. My concern is, well, who would determine what's appropriate? And in terms of, I think it's a matter for the elected council to determine what's appropriate, because if we put it up there, it's going to be left to council officers, and council officers will, I think, use the lens that the Chief Executive Officer has spelled out for when
I'm a bit uncomfortable with that comment.
Council owns the budget, the officers don't. We decide what's in it and what's
Can I
not
finish
in it.
my comments? You may be uncomfortable with them, and that's fine, but I'd like to continue. So the CEO has explained that if he considers it's a matter that it's material change that's warranted now, he would consider it and put it up. But there may be instances where we
Councillor
receive
Franco,
submissions.
can I just help you? That's not how it works. Every submission we received would be submitted to this council for consideration. Our comments would be included in such a report, but you will be the ones to decide whether or not a proposal which is put to us should go into the budget or not. We might well make a recommendation, but you're not going to be
We're talking to Councillor Parks' amendment to my amendment.
No, I'm commenting on what you've actually said.
Okay, but
We will not be withholding information from you on the basis that we are applying a particular filter to it. Any submission received, no matter what it's about, what is received, you will receive and you will decide what to do with the budget.
Chair, I move that we resume standing orders.
I'm in the middle of my comments. You can shut me down, but I think...
It's simply a matter of resuming standing orders.
I'm in the middle of my comments.
Councillor Franco, as chair, can I ask that you summarise your comments in 30 seconds and then, as Councillor Parks suggested,
Chair,
we'll go
you've
into
just
resume
given
standing
everybody
orders.
else an opportunity to speak, and you're saying that I get 30 seconds because Councillor Parks said he wants to resume standing orders in the middle of my comments.
Councillor Franco, I was actually going to call that as Councillor Parks said it, because I'm looking at the time and the length of the meeting.
So in response,
you
just
have
shut
had
me down.
No, you've had opportunity to speak
No,
at the
I actually
start.
haven't. I've started speaking.
And sorry, you had opportunity to respond to Councillor Parks' motion.
I haven't had the opportunity to respond.
When-
I have not been afforded that opportunity.
Sorry, when Councillor Parks suggested an amendment to your motion, you did have an opportunity to speak.
No, I didn't. If you recall what occurred, I said, no, I don't want to accept for this reason I was going to expand, and I was cut off by my colleagues, and you continued down that path and invited others to speak.
All right, and sorry, looking at the governance rules, when a councillor has requested that we resume standing orders,
In the middle of another councillor speaking, where you've got the right to allow me to continue.
that's right, and in governance rules it says to act immediately, and I've given you the courtesy of an additional 30 seconds. So could you please very quickly summarise, and then we will move to open the meeting.
Okay. First, it's common practice for local governments to consult on the budget. It's common practice. We previously did it. We've moved away because we were unhappy with the approach. And in fact, we've gone backwards, in my view, rather than forwards by reducing the consultation the way is proposed here. What's disingenuous and dishonest is to suggest that Councillor Addis made the comment saying we can't make substantial changes, and it's disingenuous and dishonest to suggest we can. I've never suggested there'd be massive overhaul of the budget. Nobody's even suggesting that. No council that's ever consulted the budget's even suggested that. So that's preposterous to even suggest that.
Thank
In
you,
relation
Councillor
to the final comment I'll make at this point, just the honest thing to do is, you know, if we say it's the council, is the draft recommendation there, or the officer's recommendation, that suggests, that's only honest if we have absolutely no intention as elected councillors at this point of ever entertaining a change to the budget or any comment to the budget.
Thank you. Your point's been made. Councillor Park, you moved to resume standing orders?
I did.
Thank you. Do I have a second, Councillor?
Happy to second.
Yeah, sorry. Councillor Addis, sorry, I had Councillor Watson's light on. I will put that motion. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Now, we are now back into standing orders. So,
Chair, my suggestion is it'd be appropriate to put Councillor Franco's amendment.
all right. Councillor Franco, I will put your amendment. All those in favour?
It's a put motion, a gag motion that Councillor Park is moving.
You don't have to second.
Sorry, Councillor Bigger, I realised you were the seconder, but you're no longer seconder. So, Councillor Franco, is there a seconder to your motion? Councillor Bigger, have you withdrawn your second?
Yes, I have on this motion.
All right, thank you. So do we have a seconder to Councillor Franco's motion?
Chair, procedurally, I'm not sure that a motion that's been moved and seconded and debated can then lapse for a want of a seconder. I haven't turned my mind to it specifically, but I'd be very surprised.
Do we just vote on it?
All right. I think moving forward, our best option is to put the motion then.
Which motion are you proposing to
The
put,
amended
Chair?
motion that Councillor Franco.
Just for clarity, I don't have a motion on the table. My motion wasn't seconded, so I don't push or pursue that motion
I think Councillor Sinfield seconded your motion.
No, she did
Councillor.
not.
Yeah, thank you. All right. So Councillor Park, do you?
Can I just be clear to help councillors understand where you are? Councillor Franco's motion, subject to Kirsten advising differently, does not have a seconder. Councillor Park's motion was moved whilst you were in, you had suspended standing orders, and therefore the motion couldn't be. That was the reason it wasn't actually accepted. There is, however, a provision in the governance rules which also states that when an amendment is moved, you must deal with that amendment before proceeding to consider any other amendment. So Councillor Franco's amendment needed to be voted on first and resolved before you could then consider any alternative amendment. That's what the governance rules actually state.
So we were voting on my amendment, and I'd like to speak to it in my concluding comments.
Thank you. Councillors, Councillor Biggar, because the debate had already been entered into, your motion to second cannot be withdrawn. Councillor Park, when you put a motion, I don't believe there was a seconder for it. So
For the put motion?
The put motion.
Yep. Well, I don't think one was called for, but...
No. So
I'm happy to second the put motion, if that's required.
all right. Thank you, Councillor Watson. So I will now put the motion.
You've got to put the put motion.
I put the put motion. Those in favour? All right, the motion is
No,
carried.
I'm against, and you didn't call who's against.
Those, sorry, Councillor Franco, those opposed.
And I call a division.
Thank you.
Just to the put motion,
To
right?
the put motion, Councillor Biggar, you oppose. And Councillor Stavrou, you oppose the put motion.
No, I thought you were going to call first those that supported the motion for the division.
Right. All right. So the next stage, I believe, is a division. Councillor Franco has called a division. So those in favour of the put motion, can I please see a show of hands? Councillor Hollingsworth, Councillor Park, Councillor Sinfield, Councillor Galt, Councillor Gillies, Councillor Watson, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Addis. Those opposed to the put motion?
Councillor Stavrou.
And Councillor Stavrou, sorry, in support of the put motion. And those against, Councillor Biggar and Councillor Franco. I declare that motion lost. Sorry, the put motion carried. Sorry. So now we proceed to vote on Councillor Franco's amendment motion. So I will now put that motion. Those in favour? Councillor Franco, Councillor Thompson. Those opposed?
Sorry, I'm confused now as to where we are. No, I'm not supporting that one.
Okay, all right, so those... Okay, so I call for those in favour of Councillor Franco's amended motion. Councillor Franco. Those against Councillor Franco's amendment, Councillor Hollingsworth, Councillor Parr, Councillor Sinfield, Councillor Gold,
Call it
Councillor
There's a
Gillies.
division.
You might want to do it once.
Thank you. All right, so we will now go through that again. Those in favour of Councillor Franco's motion, Councillor Franco? No. Sorry. And those against Councillor Franco's amended motion, Councillor Hollingsworth, Councillor Parr, Councillor Sinfield, Councillor Galt, Councillor Gillies, Councillor Watson, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Addis and Councillor Biggar and Councillor Stavrou. Thank you.
Substantive motion.
All right, so that, Councillor Franco, your motion has failed. We now go back to the substantive motion. Councillor Sinfield.
I'm happy to affirm the officer's recommendation as the substantive motion.
Thank you. And second by Councillor Thompson, I believe. Is that correct?
No, I'm actually going to amend it to where Councillor Park originally had it, which was to reflect 24, 25, 25, 26 as appropriate.
And I would like to second.
That amendment didn't get a seconder, so.
No, but I'm moving it as an amendment.
Oh, okay.
Well, we haven't actually got this. I'm seconding the substantive motion.
Substantive motion was already moved by Councillor Sinfield and seconded by Councillor Thompson.
No,
I'm moving an amendment.
So, but you're the seconder.
So Councillor Thompson, you second the original motion that Councillor Sinfield put.
Substantive motion that was moved before.
I did too, yes, you're right.
Thank you, thank you. Okay.
Fine.
All right, Governance 101, here we go. All right, so Councillor Sinfield and Councillor Thompson.
But I can.
Yeah. Is anyone opposed to the officer recommendation that Councillor Sinfield has moved?
And I would like to amend that in the way that,
In
in the same way that Councillor Thompson had just described.
Okay, Councillor Biggar, would you like to move the amendment?
I would like to move it that it says for the 24, 25, or 25, 26 financial year as appropriate.
Thank you. And Councillor Sinfield, as the mover of the motion, what I should ask first,
Would she
if she would
consider
like
that?
to accept your proposed amendment.
I don't accept that, but Councillor Biggar is within her rights to move an amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Biggar has moved that motion. Is there a seconder to the amended motion? On the screen behind.
That's not what I wanted though, what you have there, just to be clear, so we don't go back to where we were. Sorry. I wanted, it was the 24, 25 or 25, 26 financial year as appropriate.
Thank you. It's a little bit difficult for me chairing at the moment because I'm looking at Councillor Stavrou. I actually don't have the screen in front of me, so. Is there a seconder to Councillor Biggar's amended motion put before us? I do not see a seconder, so I declare that motion failed. Lapsed. Councillor Sinfield, as the, yes. Would you like to move the motion you foreshadowed earlier?
For the third time tonight, I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation as originally published.
Thank you. And, all right. All right, Councillor Thompson, because you've already seconded, I ask, is there any? All right.
Councillor Hollingsworth, I'd like to test with my colleagues that we put the motion.
I'll second that.
Councillors, I ask for a vote of the put motion. Those in favour? I declare that carried.
There are people who may want to vote against,
Sorry.
Chair, and
Sorry, those opposed. Councillor Franco Panca.
I'll call a division. I'll call a division each time a gag motion is used in this council.
All right. I call a division. Those in favour of the motion put by councillor...
The put motion.
The put motion, thank you. Can I see those in favour of the put motion to call a division? Councillor Hollingsworth, Councillor Park, Councillor Sinfield, Councillor Gold, Councillor Gillies, Councillor Watson, Councillor Thompson and Councillor Addis, and Councillor Stavrou. Those opposed to the put motion, Councillor Biggar and Councillor Franco. I declare that carried.
Now we have to vote on the motion.
So we now move to the substantive motion that I believe Councillor Sinfield has, thank you, has moved that motion and Councillor Thompson has seconded. I will now put that motion. Those in favour? Those against? I declare that motion
Chair,
carried.
Madam Mayor, you forgot to vote.
Abstentions as well.
I will put that to the vote. Those in favour? All right. Those against?
And yourself, Madam Mayor.
I call a division.
Wait, I haven't even done my abstention.
Can we call for votes again?
I'm going to call a division, so just do it once.
We'll go to the division.
You haven't...
I think we've got to go through the vote again, Chair. Go through the motion.
Okay.
The vote.
All right. Those, I will put the motion. Those in favour? And I can see Councillor Stavrou as well. Those opposed? Councillor Franco. Those abstain? Thank you, Councillor Biggar. Thank you. I declare the motion carried.
And I call a division.
Thank you. Okay. Those in favour of the motion, Councillor Hollingsworth, Councillor Park, Councillor Sinfield, Councillor Galt, Councillor Gillies, Councillor Watson, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Addis, and Councillor Stavrou. Those abstained? You're opposed. Those opposed, Councillor Franco. Those abstained, Councillor Biggar. I declare that motion carried. Thank you. Oh, that was easy. We now move to the closing of the meeting. This brings us to the end of the order of business. I thank those who have joined us in the gallery and those online, and I now declare this council meeting closed at 10:30. Thank you.